Hello, welcome to Homebrew Labs. I am the Mad Homebrewist. This is my second video. My first was 3 subclasses I made for Kraken Week a few weeks ago. I'm still figuring out how I want to do things, but hopefully my sound quality will be better this time and the video editing will hopefully turn out a little nicer. I was going to do this video last week, but I had family vacation and I wasn't able to finish the preparations for it before it was time for us to go. But I'm actually a little happy about that because the extra time that it gave me after we got back, I ended up rethinking a number of things, and so I hope you like it. Anyway, this time I decided to go over an idea I've been using with creatures for a while now, and I'm going to show you some of the creatures that I made with it. The idea stemmed from looking at various stat blocks that are clearly meant to be the same type of creature at different stages in its growth, from newborn to ancient. For a lot of them, it's just that the creators wanted to have creatures of different difficulties but with the same flavor, which is not only fine, but I love that they do that. I want to be able to have my players fight similar creatures repeatedly, but have them grow progressively more difficult as the party levels up and are able to handle more difficult threats. The easiest example to see of this is, of course, dragons. Most dragons in the books have versions that are wormling, young, adult, and ancient. Some also have great worm. If you compare the stat blocks for the same type of dragon at these different age categories, they're obviously meant to be progressing from one to the next. They do learn new abilities as they grow to new age categories, which also makes sense, but the previous abilities are retained and can clearly be seen as growing more powerful. And when their abilities have numbers involved, such as attack modifiers and DCs, if you do the math, these can be seen to be tied to their ability scores and their proficiency bonus just as they would be for player characters. So what's the point of this? Well, I came up with a way to extrapolate from these stat blocks to see what each such creature would look like between the different CRs that are in the books. I decided to make it so each age category can have a range of CRs, cutting off where it moves up to the next age category. At these cutoffs is where they learn new abilities and possibly increase their size category. So the different stat blocks are still used, but this method makes it so that if I want to increase the difficulty of an encounter because the encounter got delayed by player choices, and now they've leveled up since I first designed it, I can choose to just slide the CR of creatures up a little bit, instead of having to completely balance around a significantly larger creature. It can just be one that's 1 or 2 CR higher. Or, if one of my players can't make it to a session, then I can slide the CR down a little bit. Either way won't drastically change the makeup of the encounter. This also has the benefit of making it harder for players to metagame, though honestly I've never had that problem in my campaigns, but I know that it happens. So now that I've got that explanation out of the way, let's jump into the creatures I made that I wanted to share in this video. And just as I used dragons as an example of my system for having a sliding CR of creatures, because dragons made such an easy example, I'm going to share some homebrew dragons that I've made. I am currently DMing a Feywild campaign and a Shadowfell campaign, both of which are very fun, but one thing I noticed when I was doing research for them is that both the Feywild and the Shadowfell have their own variations of dragons. I'm planning to do a video on dragons tied to the Shadowfell at some point in the future, but for now, let's focus on the Feywild dragons. There are 2 types of dragons tied to the Feywild: fairy dragons and moonstone dragons. Fairy dragons are described as cat-sized dragons with butterfly wings. They change colors as they age. There are 2 stat blocks for them called younger and older, but both of them are low level. It doesn't give us any information about how the first fairy dragons came to be, which I choose to think would be because no one actually knows. Honestly, I don't think these should be considered to be true dragons. They seem more like stronger versions of pseudo-dragons. With moonstone dragons, on the other hand, Fizban's has a story of a clever dragon near the dawn of time hiding its clutch of eggs in the Feywild. Those dragons were suffused with the nature of the Feywild and became the first moonstone dragons. If you haven't looked at the moonstone dragons, they're worth a look. They're one of my favorites. So this gives us a precedent for there being dragons that have been altered by the Feywild. But the Feywild is a complicated plane with a lot of different aspects to it, so I decided to make a few more types of Fey dragons, and since we have 5 metallic, 5 chromatic, and 5 gem dragons, I decided to add 4 more types of Fey dragons, which when combined with moonstone dragons brings them up to 5 as well. The first one I came up with are the Vine Dragons. These dragons were suffused with the Feywild's tendency toward rampant growth of plants. They are covered in vines growing from their scales, causing them to look like they've got thousands of dreadlocks. They're a mix of gray, green, and brown. Only those who have never heard of vine dragons and know very little of green dragons would confuse them with each other. Vine dragons primarily inhabit forests and swamps in the Feywild, and have a love of nature, leading them to fiercely defend it against civilization. Their breath weapon sprays a torrent of vines at their enemies, requiring a strength saving throw and dealing a mixture of bludgeoning and poison damage, and also grapples creatures that fail their saves. They also learn some spells that draw primarily from the Druid spell list, but also includes Black Tentacles, which I would flavor as vines when they cast it. Next, I came up with Vibrant Dragons. These dragons were suffused with the Feywild's changeability, always changing to fit the emotions and imaginations of powerful minds. Personality-wise, they tend to be bipolar and have extreme ADHD. They're able to change their primary color a number of times per day and have different spells they're able to cast based on their color. They have spell slots that they use to cast these spells. That way they can't just change their color to get more spells per day. And their breath is a dream-inducing haze, which causes creatures to take psychic damage and become dazed so they get less action economy for their next turn, similar to the Tasha's Mind Whip spell. And that brings us to Summer and Winter Dragons, which are infused with the eternal struggle between the two main courts of the Fae. Summer Dragons are a mixture of red, orange, yellow, and green, and are playful but quick to anger. Their breath weapon is a mist of sparkling energy which requires a charisma save, causing creatures to take fire and radiant damage and doing a soft taunt effect on a failure, so creatures have disadvantage against creatures other than the dragon, which makes it so Summer Dragons will work well as part of a group, rather than just being a solo encounter. They also learn spells that primarily have to do with fire and healing. Winter Dragons are a mixture of black, blue, gray, and white, and have puffs of white snow-like fur on parts of them. They are cruel and coldly logical, but also tend to be slow to anger. Their breath weapon is a fog of freezing psychic gas. Creatures have to make a charisma save, taking cold and psychic damage and getting restrained by ice on a failure, similar to the Rhymes Binding Ice spell. They also learn spells related to cold and darkness. I'm adding homebrewery PDFs of the full dragons for all 4 types, with tables that can be used to make a dragon of that type for any CR between 2 and 21. I'm also including PDFs of the Vine Dragon at CRs 2, 6, 12, and 21, which are the lowest CRs for each age category. If anyone wants a PDF of any of these dragons at any particular CR, go ahead and ask in the comments. I can make them quickly and add them, but that's way too many PDFs to add in if they're not requested. Other than that, what should I do next? Like I said, I'm planning on doing a video for my ideas for dragons influenced by the Shadowfell. There are already Shadow Dragons, but they're actually meant as a template that you could add on top of any existing dragon, which is cool, but I feel like dragons born in the Shadowfell would be more affected by it than that, so I'm working on 5 types of what I'm calling Dark Dragons. I've also got some spells and magic items I've made that I could do videos for, as well as new racial or species options. I may also do some videos where I just talk about things that I've been thinking about, but I'll always try to have some kind of free content included. Anyway, please like and subscribe and let me know what I should do next, and I hope you all have a good day.